Years ago, about 1990, 1991 or so, I was in my shop down in Florida, and I had a motor shop about a mile from the port there at Cape Canaveral. And that's where all of my books were, my library. It was pretty much in two different rooms. And my buddy Tony Mack, he nicknamed my library the Shrine. So I was working in the Shrine, my office one evening, and all of a sudden I heard a thud. I think I was doing taxes or invoicing or something, heard a thud in the room next to me. So I went there, and there was a book laying in the floor with the pages spread open. Surprised, I said, my cats weren't in there. How did that book fall off? I could see it was like off the fourth or fifth shelf up of one of my bookcases. So I picked the book up and I put it back where it came from. It had a hole there. And didn't think much of it. Just like, scratching, how'd that happen? And about 3 months later or so, the same thing happened again. I was working late at night, and I heard a thud. I went into my Shrine room. There was another book laying in the floor. And I looked up, and it came from pretty high up. So I just took it and put it back up on the shelf. And it was, about 6-7 months after that, that I had the privilege and the honor of meeting Eustace Mullins, because I was real good friends with his chauffeur that was driving him around in Florida on his speaking tour. And Eustace Mullins came to the Shrine, and he was, really into all my books. And my books, all my friends from Atlanta, Chattanooga, Rome, they would come down and just love reading my old books. They were just loving it. And Eustace Mullins actually wanted to borrow a couple of my books. I was like, man, that's a privilege. If you got books that Eustace Mullins wanted to borrow, you were heavy, because he was brilliant. You're going to find a lot of crap about him online, which isn't true. The guy was brilliant. He worked at the Library of Congress for what, almost 20 years or something like that. And while I'm on Eustace Mullins, he was, I guess, one of the very first true speed readers. He was a true speed reader, and he had a very wonderful memory, brilliant man. And he gave me pointers on how to increase my reading speed, which I did, and he was right. Now I can read super fast. I'm not a speed reader, but I read very, very fast. And in talking, one time I mentioned to him, I said, yeah, I got a story you won't believe. He goes, well, what's that? I said, I was working, it happened to me a couple of times, working late at night, and a book just seems to fall off the shelf by itself and land on the floor. I said, I have no reason, to understand why that happened. He goes, oh, that's a flying book. I said, what? He goes, oh, yeah, that happens, occasionally. He said, what you had was a flying book. I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, what did you do? I said, I picked it up and put it back up on the shelf. He goes, oh, no, you don't want to do that. I said, what do you do? He said, you carefully pick it up to the open page that it fell on the floor, and you start reading right there. He said, because somebody is trying to tell you something. There's some kind of ether or something, that there's something there that you need to read. I thought, man, that's pretty strange. I said, okay, all right. I took it to heart. And it was several months after that I was working in my office late at night. I think I was doing invoicing or something like that, and I was real depressed. I was having a hard time going through a divorce, and different things were happening. I was very depressed. Things weren't going right with some of my projects. I was covered up. I didn't feel good. Just real sad and down in the dumps. And I'm sitting there at my desk, and thud. I heard something in the room next door. I knew none of my cats were there. My cats didn't climb around on the upper shelves of my bookcases anyway. So what was that? So I went into the Shrine room, and this book right here was laying just as you see it here. So I remembered what Eustace Mullins had told me, and I carefully picked it up, and I started reading right there. And it was this book right here, Leaves from a Russian Diary. by Dr. Pitirim Sorokin, who was a professor at the University of Petrograd. I believe he's a professor of sociology or psychology. Brilliant man. And you can go online now and read book reviews concerning Leaves from a Russian Diary, and you're going to see horrible, terrible, disgusting, the most unbelievable circumstances that these men and Dr. Sorokin were living in. Unbelievable. Amazing. And he's writing in the late teens, 19, 17, 18, 19. The book is actually published in 1950. But he was writing during, just post World War I, concerning all of the change that was going on in Russia at that time. And he spent a lot of time in Russian prison camps and with people that he knew. And after reading 5 or 6 pages, I just broke down crying. And I said, what in the world? And it became obvious to me that no matter how bad my life was, the trials and tribulations, my depressions, whatever, they weren't anything compared to what these men went through. Nothing. Nothing. And I highly recommend it. Anybody, if you're feeling down in the dumps, get this book here. And if your life doesn't cheer you up, you're nuts. And I explained the story of the flying books to one of my friends in Connecticut, and he said, man, that's strange. That's a good story. Do you have any other strange book stories? I said, yeah, I do. He said, put them in it. I said, okay. So I'm going to talk about this book right here. It cost me a fortune. And I bought it back in either the late 80s or the early 90s. It's printed in 1834 by Josiah Priest. Beautiful book. I think I paid like $300 for it. And it's titled American Antiquities. And after I read the book the first time, or second time, whatever, a book like that I read more than once, I typed up a book report on it. I have all these notes, just, several pages of notes here, you can see. I keep with the book, keep them in plastic, keep them with it, because I don't write in these real expensive old books. And there was a story in there about the Etowah Mounds. The Etowah Mound Complex is in Bartow County, Georgia, south of where I grew up. And I had a friend down from Georgia or somewhere that was, that I was relating this story to. And he wanted to see it in the book. I said, well, I had it in the book report and I got it right here. Oh, so I just went right to the page. And guess what? The story ain't there. It's not in this book anymore. And I remembered the story so well, I wrote about it in my report. I had it listed on the pages of my notes, but the story wasn't there. The story was about the 2 large mounds on the west side of the Etowah River back in the early 1800s that aren't there anymore. And it was because the farmer that owned that property demolished them right when they were building the Altoona Dam. The story's not there. The print's not there. And I'm like, well, how did that happen? What's going on there? Moving forward, in about 1993, I had the privilege of meeting Al Bielek through a mutual friend who knew his protege, Peter Sokol. And I got to meet Peter Sokol and Al Bielek, talked to him over the phone, and I developed a rapport with Al Bielek over the phone, spoke to him several times. And I didn't get to meet Al Bielek in person until 1997. And I asked Al Bielek, I said, Al, have you known of print changing in books and stories just vanishing from a book? And he goes, yeah, I've heard of that before. He said it generally is an older book, and why that happens, he didn't have an explanation for it, but he had heard of people who had books that for some reason, some way, somehow, stories got changed or eliminated or just vanished. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty strange, isn't it? Well, moving forward to 2004, I was working at a recording studio down in Rome, Georgia, NRC. And someone had given me the book, The Rivers Ran East, which is about this explorer in the Amazon jungle, South America. And he's writing about all of his escapades. Unbelievable, harrowing stories. Exciting. This is an adrenaline rush. And there was an unusual story in there about this woman that came into the camp one night, and she had what they called the laughing disease. And the laughing disease, if you go online today, you'll see that it was like discovered in like Guam, someplace back in the like 1954, 56 or something like that. And they liken it to hydrophobia or rabies, where you just go ape nuts crazy. He said that the woman was extremely sexually excited, and that she just laughed herself to death in this book. I remember it, reading it, and it stuck in my mind as something, wow, because I was thinking about doing a video of the strange ways that people die. And I thought of, if you're laughing yourself to death and you are extremely sexually excited when you die, that can't be all that bad. I'm just saying. But I remember the story in here. And in 2015, when I was doing my, like spring of 2015, I was doing some research concerning doing a video on different ways and unusual ways that people die. So I got the book out again. I read it. Didn't find the story. Must be something wrong. I read it again, and the story's not there. I thought that maybe I had one up on Google, because Google says it was discovered in, 1954, 55. This book is printed in 1954. But the author, is writing from 1946. And I thought I had one on Google, because I had it recorded by an author from 1946, printed, published in 1954. So I figured I had something that Google had wrong. But the story wasn't there. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I knew it was in this book. So what did I do? I went online and I bought another one. I couldn't be going crazy. I'm not nuts. I knew the story was in the book. I read it. The story's not in there. The story isn't in there anymore. So, if you have any idea of how these books fly off the shelf, or how the prints changed in these books, I'd like to hear your opinion. Give me a comment. Hope you enjoyed this short little ditty. Thank you.